Wait, what about weird?
Hi, I'm Elena,
And I'm Echo.
and this is our podcast, What About Weird? A podcast
A podcast dissecting. We dissect.
dissecting the weird. We
I
dissect
kind
the
of like
weird.
that. We do.
We do. We'll keep this. We'll workshop it. A podcast discussing all things weird, from cryptids and aliens to strange science and unhinged history. There we go. I got through it, even though I fucked it up. This is going to be a fun episode because I was telling Echo before this started that I am running on not enough sleep. And life has been lifing, so I have not had time to organize my notes. I did a fair bit of research, but I have not had time to organize it, and it would be confusing even if I did organize it. So, yay!
So extra confusion.
Extra confusing, but we keep forgetting that we have a 5-star review on Apple to read. You have that pulled up because I do not have access to that.
Yes. So
Sorry we keep forgetting to read it. It's been a while.
I didn't even know we were going to read 5-star reviews until Elena was like, hey, you should read that. And I was like, that's probably a good idea.
I figure it'll encourage people,
Yeah, that's
Leave
true.
us a good rating, please. Pretty please. It makes our hearts happy.
I mean,
And it
honestly,
makes
even if somebody writes a bad review, I think I'll still read it so we can laugh about it.
Yeah.
But please don't.
If you leave us a bad review, give us 5 stars.
Yeah,
5
there
stars.
We go.
Shut the fuck up. We'll read that. But yeah, so 5 stars help with the magical, mystical algorithm that we do not understand. So please leave us 5 stars. I'm assuming it helps on Spotify. I have been told it helps on Apple. But I don't understand technology. I'm not the tech person. And you barely are.
Yeah, it's like, I'm like half a step above Elena in terms of tech, but we're both like the lowest level of technological knowledge.
You're literally only the tech person because you have a better computer than I do and better internet.
Exactly.
Which, speaking of, I hope I do not cut out in this episode because it has been raining and I have satellite internet and it gets grumpy when it rains. But my internet's still better than my last internet, and my other option is dial-up, so I'm kind of fucked anyway. So here's hoping. Anyway.
Okay. Well, this review is from Stabby Greg. The title is The Smartest Show Around, and this was posted about a month ago. It says, What About Weird is the most well-researched show I've ever listened to. From fungus to cryptids and satanic panic to Jonestown, Elena and Echo dive deep into the facts, details, and stories. Come for the intriguing topics, but leave with enough new knowledge to help make you the weirdest person at parties. Keep up the great weird work. I love that so much.
I love that.
That is literally the goal. If you are the weirdest person at the party because you know random shit from this podcast, I'm so proud of you. Keep going.
Yes, we encourage you to start weird conversations at parties. Go to parties because we probably will not be going to them. Be cool. Listen to our podcast. Rate it. Alrighty. Should I dive into my slightly confusing episode?
What is your episode about?
I would like to start with a content warning. I'm sorry we're hitting you with another gruesome episode right after the medical one. No, we did vampires. But I don't understand anything. We recorded them. We recorded them all at the same time. So
yeah.
But yeah. Content
warning.
So
we had a little bit of a break where it was like kind of just a fun story.
Yeah. We talked about Canadian vampires. But yeah, content warning. There's going to be topics of like discussions of murder, violence against women, sexual assault, mutilation, all that fun stuff. So, yeah.
Yikes. Okay.
Yikes. But I did think this was a sort of because of some of those things and some other stuff we'll get into. I thought this would be a important topic to cover for Women's History Month because there's a lot of things that kind of are like, hey, this is why these things are important for women, and sort of a like look back at how women were viewed and to some extent still are. So that's why I decided to do this episode now. So we have a little bit of a ghost story with this. I will say I was going to do the ghost story and then I took a left turn straight into just murder.
Oh.
So, because I couldn't find enough stuff on the ghost story stuff.
Okay.
But, so as I heard it, just outside of Fort Thomas in some woods nearby, there wanders the ghost of a headless woman, said to roam the earth in search of justice and in search of her head. If you go out there and sing out, Miss Pearl who took your head, she will appear to you and point into the woods, possibly to the location where her head is hidden, though to this day no one has ever found it. They said she was killed by a lover who dumped her body in the woods, where she wanders. This isn't the only ghost story about Pearl Bryan, but it is the one that I heard as a kid. But who was she, and how did she really die, and what happened to her head? So that is what we're talking about today. The murder of Pearl Bryan.
I like how you're like, I can't find very much about the ghost. So I am going mostly into the murder, and then you start out with the ghost story.
Yes. Well, that's how I wanted to, because that's what brought me into this episode was I'd heard this story as a kid, and I wanted to look into the ghost story more. There are other ghost stories of, like, she haunts this music store nearby because she liked music and was a music student and stuff. She haunts this area, she haunts that area. It was a lot of, like, this person who was murdered supposedly haunts here. The same person supposedly haunts here, and like everywhere in Fort Thomas, basically. Like the Fort Thomas area basically is like, she haunts here. Come here. She haunts it.
I love it when either folklore or ghost stories have like a real story behind them.
Yeah.
I mean, I obviously don't love that people are out there getting murdered, but if we're gonna make ghost stories, it is kind of cool if they're based off of real events.
Oh no, I love when they're based off of real events and it's not just like, we're making stories up to, What I've realized I find most fascinating about ghost stories, like I like them, they're fun. And like there's haunting stories, but like with ghost stories, I like hearing the ghost story and then hearing how the ghost story happened, Like how do we get to this point where like you were saying, what's it actually based off of?
Right, exactly.
So I also did not write down any pronunciations of names. So
it's okay.
That's gonna be
I'm gonna
fun.
mess that up in my episode too. So it's
the
fine.
only one.
Nobody expects us, like anybody who listens to this podcast has listened to even one episode, does not expect us to pronounce anything right ever.
Here's the thing about us, right? We can find the facts. We just can't pronounce them, and I can barely read. So we'll get you the facts. We'll just stutter and stumble through them.
Yep, pretty much.
So, in February of 1896, a young man by the name of John Hulling, a farm worker of John Locke. I'm going to be listing off a lot of names because, again, I just wrote this out as I went and I didn't have time to take out what was and wasn't important. So,
okay.
But John Hulling, a farm worker of John Locke, was walking through one of the fields belonging to his employer when he stumbled across the remains of a woman in a ditch dressed in a light blue checkered dress, laying with her... Why did I spell feet that way?
Oh no, how did you spell it?
I spelled it.
F-E-A-T?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, okay. I got it right.
Yeah. That's not the most abhorrent spelling I have, but I was like, hang on.
No, I mean, it's just another, like, spelling of that word, so it's, like, not
different
that bad,
word, different
honestly.
meaning, but...
Yeah.
If it doesn't have a squiggly red line under it, I'm not aware. But she was laying with her feet up the hill. When he approached, to his horror, he found that the woman had been fully decapitated. He immediately ran to the authorities.
I would hope so.
Yeah, no, I would, rather than just be like, ho-hum, on with my day.
That's not my problem.
I mean, there's people that'll do that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I've gone back and forth with this of like, would I immediately run to the authorities or would I immediately just be like, fuck, and die of anxiety? You know? Or would like,
Yeah.
or like, so, do you ever think about if, I'm sorry, this is going to be a very off the rails episode, but do you ever like wonder if like what you would do if you accidentally killed someone or somebody died in your vicinity? Like, would you tell the authorities or like would you freak out and hide the body? You know what I
I
mean?
would, man, I would definitely tell the authorities because, like, if you don't, you're just gonna be in deeper shit later. And I also have
Yeah,
like,
that's what
I
I
have to
think.
come clean about everything all of the time. Otherwise, I'm having anxiety about being found out. Like, I could not
Yeah.
commit crimes. I would be stressed out all the fucking time. I would literally, if anyone out there has read Crime and Punishment, that is fucking me until I finally just end up at the police station. They're literally clearing me for the murder. And I'm like, wait, I did it. I did it. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I feel like I would tell the authorities, but if I ever tried to hide it, I would try and hide it and then immediately cop up to it. Just be like, they're like, "Has anyone seen Billy?" And I'm like, "No, I haven't." But I definitely hit him in the hay bale out back. So you might want to go look there. I kind of freaked out and hit him. So sorry, my bad. Contaminated the crime scene. Whoopsie. Daisy.
Even if you didn't like murder them and you just freaked out and like hid the body, you would look like a murderer. Like that wouldn't be
I
good. I hope
know.
nobody ever dies in front of you because that's a terrible
Yeah,
sign of
you heard it
shit.
here first. Dude, if you think you're going to die and you're around me, just don't. Just wait, please. Just go somewhere else.
Go die somewhere that's not next to me.
Yeah. If I like I mean if you're having a heart attack, I'm gonna give you CPR, but like I don't know, if you're like dying of poison and there's nothing you can do, I'm just gonna sprint off, maybe get the authorities, or maybe just be like, just don't die near me. Anyway, this guy did what you're supposed to, and he immediately ran to the authorities. Um, the the body and what she was wearing was in disarray, so the police initially thought that she might have been sexually assaulted before her murder, but they later found out this was not the case. But there definitely had been a struggle since she was all like disheveled and she had defensive wounds on her arms, back, and hands. During the autopsy, the doctor discovered that she had still been alive when she was decapitated.
Oh my
And
god.
yeah, and I think we had talked about this a little bit in the Dyatlov Pass episode, when we got into some of the science of like forensics and stuff. They can figure out, for those of you who don't know, they can figure out if somebody's like, if an injury happened after death based off of how they bled. Because if you're dead, obviously your heart isn't still pumping.
Right.
So, but yeah, that's super like gnarly.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, that's terrible. That's pretty bad.
yeah, and I apologize. The first chunk of this is just dead body shit.
Jesus,
And then
okay.
it gets to more of the investigations and the like people behind stuff. So sorry, the first good chunk of this is just gonna be gross. What is that? Because of the inability to identify her, obviously because she didn't have a head, and they had a really hard time fingerprinting her, and that wasn't, it was a thing, but it wasn't as big of a thing at this point. Like not every police station knew how to properly fingerprint somebody, and if they didn't have your fingerprints in their files specifically, they couldn't identify you. So your fingerprints could be on file somewhere else in like 2 towns over, and they would never know. But so they were
Wow.
unable to identify her, and based off of where her body was found, they originally thought that she was a local sex worker who was killed by a soldier from the fort. But there were no working women missing, and this is a thing that we see a lot with, especially unidentified bodies or just women who die in general. If there's any question around their identity, immediately people jump to, oh, she must have been a sex worker who was
I
killed by
know.
it. And like that just, there is a whole thing with the less dead phenomenon of like, well, these people aren't going to be missed as much, but it's just, there's
Yeah,
this
but
knee
like
jerk response to be
every
like, if you got in the situation of, it's almost victim blamey to me from my perspective. Other people may read this differently, but whenever they automatically jump to this person must have been a sex worker, it comes off to me as like, in order to get yourself in a position to be murdered, you have to have been doing something wrong yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and which is so fair because, like, I understand a little bit why there's the compulsion to be like, well, she must have been a sex worker because they are murdered at a higher rate. But at the same time, you can't just like assume every like woman's body that shows up murdered is
Yeah.
a sex worker.
Yeah, no, you like, and I can only imagine how many cases have just been brushed off because people assume that it's a sex worker.
Oh yeah, like it's
Um,
less important to them then.
yeah, and I mean, I know like there are statistics showing that this is really a thing that happens a lot with women of color of like, well, she's not white and she wasn't dressed nice, so she must be a sex worker. I will say that she was, in this case, she was white, but she wasn't dressed super nice, and that will
Oh.
come in here actually. I think I get into it later. Again, my notes are all over the place. It's because of where she was as well. She was right by the military fort, but she was wearing like a hand-me-down house dress, and at this time, like it was super bad to go out in your like house clothes, especially if you're well off, so that's why they assumed, oh, this is an older dress. It's because of the color and the material and whatever. She must not be that well off, or later on things get twisted into, not she was a sex worker, but she was, and like you still find articles today, and that was a big thing with some of my research of, oh, she was just a poor little innocent farm girl because of what she's wearing this blue checkered dress. She was such a poor little innocent farm girl. And just like making assumptions based off of what she was wearing because it wasn't that nice. Like a lot of articles even now were saying that she was just a poor little farm girl, but you can find her grave on, you can go to findagrave.com and find her, and like find that she was, we'll get into it more later, but she was like well off. And just these assumptions that people make for women based off of what they're in, of like,
Yeah, what they're
oh, she's
wearing.
this. Yeah. And also it was kind of reading some of the reports, it got kind of like icky because not just because of the like decapitation and blood and guts and stuff, but because they like went into a lot of detail of the underwear she was wearing.
Oh, come on.
And like they would not, I guarantee you, they would not do that with a man. They would not
No,
say
literally,
that
like if
this
a man gets murdered, they're not like, oh, he was wearing these types of boxers. Like, but
yeah,
really, a woman gets murdered and you have to like literally describe the
they're
underwear she was wearing?
yeah,
Fuck
they
off.
they were like, she had this blue dress and a like a light blue dress and a dark blue underskirt, and she had, and then they just listed that off, and then they're listing like the color and the material and the cut of her undergarments, and it's like, that's gross. On the one hand, I can understand if you think she's a sex worker being like, well, maybe somebody who had hired her could identify her from that. But still, like, why are you describing her underwear more than her clothes? Because if you're trying to find someone who last saw her, maybe someone on the street of, I saw her walking in, you're not going to be like, yeah, I saw a woman in a blue dress walking in, but I don't know what color her underwear was. Like, it's
Exactly.
so
Like,
icky.
it literally, there is
It's
no
irrelevant.
reason. Yeah, there's no reason for them to report on that. It is quite
Yeah.
literally irrelevant to the entire thing.
Yeah, and that's just, again, this is another reason why I want to bring it up on Women's History Month, is like these are some things that like I haven't really researched other like crime stories from the time, but you do see this a lot of like certain things with women, especially like more private things are put out in public that men don't get. But
Yeah.
where was I?
That's fucking crazy to me.
Yeah, no, it was wild. But one thing about what she was wearing, the person that performed the autopsy noticed that she had her shoe size was 2211, and then there was a code after it. This means that it was 22 meant a size 3 at the time, which is equivalent to a modern day size 4 or 4.5.
Whoa,
this is
so really, tiny feet.
And
That's
the
crazy.
average shoe size at the time, I went down a whole rabbit hole of 1890s shoe sizes. But the average shoe size at this time was a lot smaller. It was usually around like a 5 or a 6. Yeah, about a 6 on the large size. So this was really, really small. And then it was listed as a B width, which is average width. I know a lot of boots have this. I don't know how many people who listen wear like work boots or like cowboy boots or whatever, but a lot of them have like a size listing in it. But it was a really tiny shoe size. And then this code at the end was the lot number for the shoe given by the manufacturer. This is how they identified the bot, which is fascinating to me.
Whoa, is based on who bought the shoes?
And so they tracked this lot number down to the manufacturer, and the manufacturer was like, well, the only person I've sold this size and this model to is this shoe store in Greencastle, Indiana. And so they went to this shoe store and they got the name of the woman that bought these shoes, and the name of that was Pearl Bryan. But that's kind of interesting that they found like the unusual shoe size is what identified her. And because there's no one else with this cut in that, like the style of that shoe in that shoe size. And that was something that a lot of people had overlooked. It like got all the way to the, some sources differed, but a lot of the sources I read said that it got all the way to the coroner before anyone noticed that it was unusually small and was like, let's use this to try and identify her.
That's some pretty good detective work for this era, I suppose. Like, you have to base on stuff like that, because what year was this again?
1896.
Yeah. That's pretty old.
Rural Kentucky.
Yeah.
And they tracked the shoe down to Indiana?
That's crazy.
We are not a geography podcast, so I don't know how far Greencastle, Indiana is from Fort Thomas, Kentucky, but that's at least across state lines.
Do you want to... Wait, what was it?
Fort Thomas is where her body was found, and the shoe store was in Greencastle, Indiana.
Fort Thomas, Kentucky to Greencastle, Indiana. Do you want to take a guess?
Shoot. I'm going to guess... Can I guess a range?
Yeah.
70 to 120 miles.
Okay, you actually weren't that far off. It's like 150 to 160.
Okay.
That's like...
So a bit further than I thought.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, so at this time, that would have been like a couple days. How fast do horses go?
Well, you probably wouldn't be...
We're doing the horse math here. We're figuring out the math with horses. We're solving this case.
Well, they usually only walk like, I don't know, like 4 miles an hour. I mean, they can obviously like, they might be like trotting the entire time, which I think is like 10 miles per hour. But, you have to like let your horse walk. You can't just like trot or gallop the entire time.
You're telling me it's not like the video games and the movies?
Where you just run everywhere on your horse.
I've been lied to. You're telling me I can't run from North Carolina to Montana in 3 days with a horse?
If they're just walking, I think like you can cover like 30 miles a day.
Okay, so that's like what?
On a horse.
It's about like a week's travel, give or take.
That's so long for like a couple hour drive now. Wow, we really take our modes of transportation for granted.
I know, right?
Holy shit.
Man, like it would be... We are side tangent city today, but like...
Oh my god, I keep derailing you so bad. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. My ADHD has been going nuts today. Like, it would be insane for me to live where I live and work where I work, like at this time. Like, that's crazy to think about because... I live like 3 counties away from where I work. Like, that's wild. I did learn something interesting. So, again, more with the derailment. I am so sorry to everybody listening. But this is what you get from me right now. But, so you know how the North Carolina and like the eastern counties are so small compared to western counties?
Yeah.
Do you know why that is?
Oh, you told me this one time before, but I can't remember right now.
It's because the counties were originally designed for people to be able to get to the county seat from anywhere in the county if they had to for legal reasons within a day. And then by the time we started spreading more westward, trains started becoming a thing, and more people started having like horses or faster modes of transportation, so the counties could get bigger because you could still get to the county seat in a day. You just had to take like a train or something.
Oh, okay, interesting.
But I just thought that was interesting because like I remember looking at a map of U.S. counties, and I was like, why does North Carolina have 100 and Colorado have like 62 or something? And then I went down a rabbit hole of that. Anyway, where was we? Where were we?
Where
Send
was
help.
we?
Where was we? I am devolving into a little creature. I am so sorry. So with this shoe size, they were able to track down the woman who had bought these shoes, and her name was Pearl Bryan. She lived in Greencastle, Indiana, and she was about age 22. Some sources said 23. They brought her family to identify the body, and they're like, yeah, that's her. Which I'm honestly surprised that, I guess, I'm somewhat surprised they didn't report her missing, but I never heard anyone. I didn't see anything saying she had been reported missing, but that doesn't mean she wasn't, because like we said, they didn't normally communicate with police departments like, 2 towns over or whatever. Like if you were in another county, and that's a whole different state, so they could have reported her missing, and the police in Kentucky never would have known about somebody, nearly 200
Missing
miles
in
away
Indiana.
in Indiana,
Exactly.
But they identified her, and during the autopsy, the examiner discovered that this unmarried woman was pregnant when she was killed. She was 5 months pregnant when she was killed.
Oh no, that's even worse. Gosh darn.
And the fact that she was unmarried and pregnant made this crime even more sensational and more scandalous. It was already sensational that this woman had been found headless, and then there were rumors flying about, and then they found out who she was and found out that she was pregnant, and it just blew up from there.
Wait,
And
so
it got
did her family say like how long it had been since they had seen her? Like how long she had kind of been missing?
I couldn't find anything about that. We get into it some later of like her second cousin was like, "Oh yeah, I saw her like 4 days ago when she was getting on a train to go to a different town." So this really kicked off the media frenzy, and it really became like twisted about who she was, and this is really where the story started getting twisted from, like turned from she was an unknown sex worker who was killed to now she's a poor innocent farm girl who was seduced by a dishonorable man who killed her, and all these stories of like it between the clothes and her being pregnant and murdered. They were like, she must have just been just this poor innocent little girl who is just a uneducated farm girl from Indiana who got killed by a nasty man. Isn't it so sensational? Oh, you get this a lot with the media if they don't know stuff about people, and even if they do, they'll twist stuff around to make stuff. And this was like kind of the height of yellow journalism.
Oh.
Of people like making up stories just to sell papers, but they're taking something that's actually true and then twisting it, and it's selling this. It's very like penny dreadful of this girl is innocent and murdered and whatever.
And how old was she at the time? Do we know?
22 or 23.
Okay.
Based off of the find a grave, it looked like she was 22. But again, some sources said 23. So at this time, she was an old maid.
Oh my god, that's so crazy because like I'm like in my head, I'm like, wow, she was so young.
I know, right? But so in truth, her family was a really well-off family. Despite what the media was saying, they were a really well-known stock and dairy breeding family and were part of the local elite in Greencastle. Pearl was even a high school graduate and was a student
Wow.
at DePaul University in Chicago studying
Which was a
music.
big deal at that
Yeah.
time. Like, women did
A
not go to school very frequently, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, even like up until recently, some rural areas had a low like graduation area like rate. I mean, you remember when we were looking into the Beast of Busco, it was like a big deal that they're like, we have this percentage of high school graduates in our town.
Right.
We have a high school. Like it, and that was like in the 40s. But yeah, so she was like really well educated. She even taught Sunday school, but the papers didn't care about that and were set on painting her as this uneducated, misguided commoner who had just strayed. And again, this was due to her clothes and just trying to sell papers. I mean, I feel like they could have also said sold papers by like local elite's daughter brutally murdered.
Yeah, literally, like you could,
But like
you can
you
still
shouldn't
make it a
use
little
someone's
like I understand wanting to like catch people's eye or whatever, but you don't have to make shit up to do that. Like, you
Yeah,
can
you
be
also
honest.
you can just like, be good at writing, but also you shouldn't be using I understand this is how the like news works and newspapers work, especially at the time, but like you shouldn't have to rely on somebody being murdered to sell papers.
Oh,
But
for
this was like
real.
such a big thing that it was like national news and this was like super like viral is the best word I can describe it as, but there were like newspapers that I was reading from like New York. Obviously there were some from Chicago because she was going to school in Chicago and like that's sort of ish in the area. But there were newspapers as far as like California that were reporting on this.
Interesting.
Um, and it got classified as like the crime of the century, which I feel like every other crime is classified as the crime of the century, but I feel like it's easier to claim the crime of the century at the end of the century, you know, or
Yeah.
maybe the beginning, I don't know. But at the end you're like, well, most of the for the century have already been committed. But they were saying that this is the crime of the century and it was so tricky. Like I was saying, it was so hard for me to find information about like who she really was because so many like there were this is the importance of finding primary sources and well-researched sources, and like the importance of media literacy is that especially with somebody who didn't have much of a voice, like I know she's a wealthier white lady, but she was a woman in the 1800s, so people weren't really listening to her voice. She didn't really have a lot of, they wouldn't, if they have an idea of who you are, they're gonna paint you a certain way. And this is why it's
Right.
so important to do your research on and like look into stuff properly, is because I was finding sources, both some like secondary that were like secondary and tertiary that were contemporary, like from the time, and secondary and tertiary from nowadays that were like, oh, she was this poor little farm girl, even though if you dig into it and go down grave records, death records, birth records, family records, and like all that stuff, she wasn't. She was very well educated. She was
Right.
like intelligent, caring, likable, taught Sunday school. Like she wasn't a immoral poor girl, you
Right,
know?
exactly.
And I think it's sort of both twisting it to sell papers and trying to twist it to be like, don't have loose morals, women, or you're gonna end up
Yes.
murdered like poor Pearl Bryan.
People just get murdered, like, because
Yeah.
other people suck. Like, I
Murderers
hate
are gonna
it when we're,
murder,
like, using it to, like, teach a lesson to the people who are the victims. Like, it shouldn't be on the fucking victims. It should be on the goddamn murderers.
Yeah.
Like, why are we doing
Don't
that?
don't murder people.
Yeah,
PSA,
literally.
don't murder
That's
people.
that's the lesson there.
Like, you can take all the precautions in the world and still get murdered. And
Yeah.
this is why I'm paranoid, you know? But it shouldn't be used as like a lesson of like, don't be like this. But it was really infuriating trying to research this because so many things were selling this story that had been made up and just going off of like one article was going off of another article going off of another article that was going off of one selling a false story. And it was, you could kind of almost track the line going down, or like, okay, well, three original sources said this, and you know, there's one or two sources that told the actual story, but there were a few more telling this false story. And I can understand that if you're just reading like contemporary news articles, you're going to see, oh, there's 3 articles saying this and 2 saying this. But if you're not going down the research of other things relating to this case that aren't just newspaper articles and looking at different types of sources, you're not going to get the full story.
Right.
But it's just kind of interesting and again frustrating how that had echoed and rippled up until like nowadays. Like I was reading articles from 3 years ago that was still selling the same story that they were selling in the Chicago Tribune or whatever in 1897.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just wild how these false stories can be told because somebody has a narrative and how that can really impact history. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But so there was one big question that was on everybody's mind with her of who was the father of the baby that she was carrying.
Of course.
Because that's all people give a shit about, and not, well, who murdered her? Which, you know.
Yeah, literally. They could be one and the same, but
it could be one and the same, which is a valid argument, but a lot of the newspaper articles that I was reading were focused on like, well, who was the dad? Who was the father? And even after they like, we'll get into it later, they find the killer and it's like, well, this guy was the killer, but he said he wasn't the father.
So who is the dad?
And it's like,
I don't know. Maybe you should just be more focused on who fucking murdered this woman. Yeah, excuse me?
Just focus on getting the person that fucking murdered her to like into prison. Yeah. Or, like taken care of, you know? But everyone was like, you know, who killed her? The authorities had, like you had said, the authorities had suspected that maybe it was one and the same.
Mm-hmm.
And especially since a out-of-wedlock pregnancy would have been a big scandal, particularly for someone who was more well off. And if they suspected that there's a good chance that the father was also well off, it would have been a huge scandal. Like with the elite, it wasn't as much seen. It was still seen as like a thing to be looked down on with lower income people.
Right.
But with the social elite and the wealthier in the era, it was pearl clutching, you know? No pun intended.
Oh, no.
But the police had identified 2 main suspects. The first was William Wood, who was Pearl's second cousin, and they were so close that even their own family believed that they might have been involved with each other. But Wood denied ever being involved with her. I mean, this is 1896, so even though it's like, we think of it as gross, Nikki, and I don't know the whole difference between, I know what a first cousin is, I'm not sure what the whole thing with second cousin is, but that's still like, that's gonna be gross. At that time,
I don't want to date someone even remotely related to me.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, me neither. Yeah, no. But they, Wood had denied that he was ever involved with her. He was just like, yeah, we were super close. We were really good friends. Like, we're family. We spent a lot of time together. But he did say that he had been aware of the pregnancy and that he had helped her to the train station. And she said she was headed to Indianapolis to meet a friend. It was later found out that she had actually gone to Cincinnati to get an abortion.
Oh, shit. Okay.
Yeah, so... Again,
so
with
she
the women's
didn't want
stuff.
this baby. So
no.
Why do we care who the dad is anyway? Because like she didn't fucking want the child. Like fuck that dude.
Well,
I guess.
Because she's trying to do. If we know who the dad is, how do we know that? If we don't know who the dad is, how do we know he didn't want the baby? It's her body, his choice, obviously. But yeah, so obviously she didn't want it, and this whole abortion thing again gets things worked up into a scandal.
Oh man.
Because even now it was scandalous, but back then, like, a lot of places didn't really have abortion clinics. It was at-home abortions. It was take this medicine to cause a miscarriage, stuff like that. And like,
Right.
this is why women's healthcare is so important, is there were so many times where women would go to get an abortion for an unwanted pregnancy for whatever reason, because it's none of your fucking business why a woman may want an abortion. And they would end up dying because of drinking low amounts, like trying to microdose poisons to cause their body to have a miscarriage and having too much, or trying to have like a physical surgical abortion and it getting botched for whatever reason and them dying. Like, this is why this, like, abortion healthcare is important. And like women's healthcare for this stuff is important. I know this was 130 years ago, but and we have better medical care now, but if you ban people from having access to that, they're going to find back alley ways to do it, and we're going to end up with, like, I think that should be the real moral of the story, not don't let yourself be seduced by a rascal man, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so the other suspect was a man several years older than Pearl by the name of Scott Jackson. He was also from a well-off family, and he was a dental student in, guess where?
At the same college as her?
Nope, in Cincinnati.
Oh, no, in Kentucky. In Cincinnati? He was a dental student.
He was a dental student in Cincinnati, where she had just gone to get an abortion. We'll point out. He had moved to Greencastle from New Jersey after turning state's evidence in an embezzlement case. So he was in New Jersey, he moved to Greencastle, and then went to Cincinnati for school. And Greencastle is where Pearl Bryan is from. I know, a lot of things to keep track of. And this is why I said even if I had organized this, it would still be confusing. But the Bryan family was aware that there was some sort of relationship between Jackson and their daughter, as they would often spend a lot of time alone together when he was home from school and she was home from school. Since he studied a form of medicine and lived in Cincinnati, and again, because they spent a lot of time together, he became the primary suspect over William Wood. And after that, the papers almost exclusively identified him as the father of the baby. Whether they said he was the killer or not, they were like, oh, he must have been the father of the baby because she was going to Cincinnati and he lived in Cincinnati and they spent time together. Yeah, even whether there was evidence for or against him being the father or not, the papers were almost exclusively like, yep, Scott Jackson was the dad.
Like, I guess I can kind of understand why they came to that conclusion, but my thoughts more so were he is literally in school for dentistry. They seem to be friends. Like, they grew up in the same area. They know each other somehow. They seem to be friends. She might have gone to him to have him perform the abortion. So that's why she was in Cincinnati, where he was, like, learning dentistry.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And that's actually where some of this stuff starts going, is that people were thinking, like you said, he was studying medicine. Maybe he was the one who had performed the abortion instead, or had tried to perform the abortion. And things start getting fuzzy here because people involved that had seen her were changing their story, and it's all sort of a he said, she said, or mostly a he said situation here. Some people had thought that maybe he had tried to, like you said, perform an abortion and had botched it for whatever reason, or some papers were saying that since he was the father, he had lured her to Cincinnati saying that, oh, we'll get married and then the child won't be born out of wedlock, whatever, and then just murdered her instead. Had he tried to perform an abortion, botched it, and then, or she ended up dying and then tried to hide the evidence. One paper published in a letter.
They thought she maybe died while having the abortion. And so he traveled with her dead body all the way to fucking Kentucky and decapitated her and left her there?
What throws me off with this entire thing, with every single bit of evidence that comes up, is the coroner said that she was decapitated while still alive. That's the one thing that doesn't jive for me.
Okay, yeah, and so if the coroner's right, she had to have been murdered in Kentucky, and she was alive while it happened.
We'll get into it. I'll get
Now,
into
don't
it
get me wrong, I'm sure
later.
coroners are relatively frequently wrong during this time, but
We'll get into it later, but there was one witness that said that he saw her like super weak getting out of like or he like helped her out of a cab or something. I don't remember off the top of my head. We'll see when I get to it, but she was like super weak and
Okay.
like not doing well. And then she like got out of this carriage in Kentucky and then with somebody, and then he got spooked. The witness got spooked and ran off and doesn't know what happened or whatever. But so there's like some stuff there of like she might have been like not doing well. They brought her to Kentucky for whatever reason, they said, and then like killed her. But so one paper had published a alleged letter from Scott Jackson to Pearl that had a prescription for a drug mixture that would cause a miscarriage. And so that really started flaring off the things of, oh, he tried to get her a miscarriage or like an abortion. And then when that didn't work, like tried to write her a prescription for something that would cause an abortion. When that didn't work, he was like, come to Cincinnati, I'll get you an abortion. And then murdered her. Not long after that, all of this came out. Sorry, were you going to say something?
I'm just confused how she ended up in Kentucky.
There's some stuff there later on. My theory is that we'll get into how she might have gotten to Kentucky, but I think she was brought to Kentucky because it was over 200 miles away and they wanted to dispose of a body in a different state where they wouldn't communicate to the local authorities, or they didn't think they would communicate.
Get her there though.
Horse? I don't know. People would.
I know, it's just confusing me because like if she was decapitated while she was still alive, she had to willingly travel to Kentucky with somebody, which means she had to have known them.
Yeah, that's we can get into some theories later, but a lot of the evidence is pointing to that it was probably Jackson, and she did know him, and like she spent a lot of time with him. But yeah, I'm not sure how far is Cincinnati from Fort?
Wow, it's literally 6.6 miles.
Oh, that's not far at all.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Okay. For some reason, I thought Cincinnati was at the top of Ohio. What?
It's literally,
I don't know Ohio
Point
geography.
Pleasant versus Gallipolis.
It's like across the border.
It's across the river, essentially. Like, that's it. That's crazy. I didn't realize they were so close together.
That adds a lot of stuff up. Because there's a lot of borders involved here.
That makes so much more sense. Because it's very easy to transport somebody like a couple of miles, let alone like 100 or something. Okay. That makes so much more sense to me.
See, I do my research on everything except for like geography. I know fuck all about geography. But for some reason, I was getting Cincinnati and Cleveland mixed up.
Yeah, I think that's where I was in my head too. Yeah.
And so I was like, wow, that's
like
a long ways to go.
mid-Ohio.
I am so sorry for anyone who I have corrected on geography about North Carolina because I apparently know fuck all about Ohio geography. So I'm sorry to anybody from Ohio who's listening, if we have anybody. This is why it's important to take the 2 seconds to look stuff up. And also, against that review that said we're the smartest podcast. Because apparently I don't know where Cincinnati is. Anyways, not long after all this stuff came out, Jackson was arrested as the primary suspect in the murder. He claimed to be innocent, but he did say that he had set up an appointment for an abortion. But he said this wasn't for his own reputation, but it was for the reputation of a friend of his and Pearl's, which would be Will Wood, which, if you remember, was one of the other suspects earlier.
Right.
Again, with men being men, he was like, I'm not doing it for my reputation. I'm not doing it for... No one even mentioned Pearl's reputation or anything, which you know, it's a whole different argument that it was an issue of reputation, but he was like, I'm doing it for a different man's reputation.
Oh
like,
my
or
god.
I'm not doing it because she doesn't want it. Like, but so there's a lot of accusations thrown back and forth, a whole bunch of stuff. And, but Jackson remained under arrest because of his background, his like prior criminal background, and his constantly changing story. And now, because now he was starting to claim that his friend Alonzo Walling was supposed to arrange the abortion, and Jackson had claimed that he had left Pearl with Alonzo so that he could go take her to get an abortion, and that was the last time he ever saw Pearl. So, make of that what you will. So there's even more back and forth between Walling and Jackson, both claiming the other was to blame. And Walling even said that Jackson confessed to him that he, like, was going to murder her, but none of the three men ever confessed to the police, at least before, like, court cases and stuff. No confession was ever made. Walling had gotten arrested as, like, they're like, I think he's involved. Wood, I know there's a lot of names here, remained...
There are so many.
Yeah.
I should have
Okay.
created, like, a fucking flowchart or something.
Flowchart. Okay. Guy from New Jersey who's the dentist. He's the primary suspect in the murder. He got arrested. His friend, who also is in Cincinnati, his friend and roommate, Alonzo Walling, got arrested under suspicion of assisting the murder.
Okay.
And William Wood, Pearl's second cousin and one of Jackson's friends, remained not under arrest because they were thinking that he had nothing to do with it and that he was telling the truth because his story remained the same of he knew about the pregnancy, she said she was going to Indianapolis, got on a train, and that was the last he ever saw her.
He basically watched her get on the train like 4 days before the incident, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And there are people saying that they saw her in Cincinnati and they would describe a man that looked a lot like Jackson and another man, sometimes with another man that looked a lot like Walling that was with her in Cincinnati. Nobody ever described anybody that looked like William Wood.
Okay.
That's why they were like, okay, we're going to arrest these two guys, these two dental students. So the only evidence they really had to go off of was witness testimony and like circumstantial evidence. And so, like I said, people reporting seeing Pearl in the company of, or someone matching Pearl's description in the company of a man meeting Jackson's description, and also later a man meeting Walling's description. A local bar owner said that he had reported seeing her, Jackson, and Walling having a few drinks in a bar together. After a few hours, they left in a horse-drawn cab. No one could identify the driver of the cab other than saying that he was a black man. So they put an ad out in the newspaper looking for this unnamed black cab driver in Cincinnati. And eventually a man by the name of George Jackson, not at all related to Scott Jackson. Again, I'm sorry, lots of names. This man, I'm going to probably keep calling Scott Jackson, or Jackson. And I'm going to be calling this guy George.
Okay.
Just because if I call them both Jackson, it's going to get confusing, and I don't want to say everyone's full name all the time.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
So George had claimed that he had been given $10 to drive a doctor and his patient across state lines. Different articles said different things, but some of what I had said was just like, hey, I'm just trying to get her to where she can get treatment. And that's why he was like, okay, sure, yeah. So he said he was driving across state lines to Kentucky when he heard a ruckus in the cab, and he tried to stop and like check on them, and he was threatened by one of the men in the cab to keep going or he would be shot. When they reached a point where the men in the cab told him to stop, the men unloaded the woman, who was, like I said, sort of was sickly, wasn't doing very well. They started taking her off into the woods, and George was really afraid because he'd been threatened multiple times, and he just left his cab and took off into the woods. Assume he came back for the cab or something. I don't know. Nothing ever mentioned what happened to that, or if the horse just like wandered off. Because nobody ever mentioned finding a cab, and he never mentioned going back for it or anything. I don't
Right.
know if Walling and Jackson had taken the cab as like their escape or whatever. But he said he
Maybe.
fled back towards Ohio. And this testimony was really like the death blow to Scott Jackson and Alonzo Walling. And this was kind of like the, okay, yeah, these guys probably did it because he was able to identify them. Again, that's still not 100% sure if the cab driver was actually this man that came forward or not. But they're just kind of going off of faith of assuming. In court, the men, Jackson and Walling, had said, no, it wasn't that they murdered him. It was a botched abortion that they tried to hide. And this George character, he was just lying, and he'd never even met them or driven them anywhere. They're not murderers. She had died by the doctor's hand and was, they were scared and decided to dispose of the body out of fear. So they're like, we didn't murder her, we just hid the body.
So literally like what you were afraid of doing earlier. They're like,
Yeah.
no, we just got nervous that she was dead there, so we just hid the body, but we didn't do the crime.
Yeah. But like the difference with me is I would be like, I'm gonna put this body over in the woods and then I'm gonna run off. They're like, we're gonna drive it across state lines, chop her head off, and then we're gonna... Which, again, it doesn't match up with the whole thing of her still being alive when she was decapitated. And I think based off of the defensive wound, she probably was, like, knocked out or something. But I don't know. Again, I'm sorry this isn't a very fun episode. It's a sad, gruesome episode. But we had a fun ghost story in the beginning. Anyway, there were a bunch of witnesses that Scott Jackson had called. And later, all of these witnesses... their testimony was thrown out because either their stories were kept changing, or they were being bribed and coached by Jackson and his attorney. But these two guys that were accused were, they claimed that the doctor that had performed the abortion was this really prominent, well-known doctor in Cincinnati, which kind of ruffled some feathers. There was this well-known doctor. But... conveniently, the doctor could not testify because he was,
of course,
put in an insane asylum shortly after this murder happened. So
what the fuck?
They couldn't take his testimony for anything because it would have been considered like the testimony of a madman or whatever. But they had said that he had decapitated her and thrown her head into the hospital incinerator, which is why nobody could find it. But it's just convenient that he couldn't testify.
Yeah.
After this, like during this whole court trial, they realized that they were starting to look really guilty, and the only way that they could hope for any sort of mercy of like life imprisonment or just a really long sentence, or I don't know, them being rich men in the 1890s, just a slap on the wrist and like, don't go murdering anybody now, you hear?
Yeah, really.
They ended up confessing, but they said,
oh shit, okay.
They would later say that they only confessed because they were afraid of being put to death. So
yeah, okay. I don't like these dudes. I don't like them one bit.
I feel like they're either scared and involved or guilty as sin. And I'm pretty sure they're guilty as sin. Whether of murder or not, I don't know, but they're guilty of something. And
yeah, they just don't add up. The vibes are off.
The vibes are off with them. But yeah, so that was back and forth. But they ended up, like, again, they're like, we confessed, but we're innocent. We confessed, which, okay. But they were saying, I do understand that, like, confessions can be forced, and there's a lot of people that are in prison, even to this day, for confessing to crimes they didn't commit because of, like, police coercion, and nobody really gave a shit about police coercion at this time, especially not at this time. But again, these are rich white men who probably normally would have just got off with a slap on the wrist. So they ended up being put to death,
Oh
and
shit.
but they continued to claim innocence. And when they were sentenced to hang, they're standing up on the gallows and were asked if they had anything more to say, and or any last words. And Jackson had said that I am not guilty of the crime I am now supposed to pay the penalty with my life for. And Alonzo Walling said that he had nothing to do other than that he was innocent and would die for it. Then the lever was pulled and they dropped, but it was not a clean hang. And the noose did not break their necks, so they just suffocated to death instead. And it
Wow.
was a very long, drawn out thing. And that just added more fuel to this fire and, like, of the media frenzy around stuff. Of some people being like, yeah, the fact that they didn't break instantly was some people are like, God, this is God saying that they were innocent and somebody should have cut them down. And other people were like, this God saying they were guilty and deserved to suffer. Um,
Right. It's a
and it was a
form
whole
of like
thing.
justice or something.
Yeah. And it was a whole thing there, but they were put to death for this. So they did confess, but they also claimed to be innocent. So take that for what you will. And both of them, other than saying, I don't know, I guess the doctor threw her head into the incinerator, claimed that they never knew what happened to her head. It was just that, I don't know, it's just gone. But Jackson did have some, like, theories he was giving out of, I don't know what happened, but what could have happened was it was thrown into the incinerator or it was thrown into the Ohio River. And some people were saying that the Jackson Walling had thrown the head into the incinerator at the dental school, like they had done it themselves. Some people like, oh, it was buried. There's some articles you can find online of like, was Pearl Bryan's head found? But it's one of those situations like Lost Colony at Roanoke solved type things where it's like, we found a head in Kentucky. Was it Pearl Bryan's? Nope. Just read our article.
Okay.
138 years later, the whereabouts of Pearl Bryan's head still remains a mystery. Nobody has ever found it, and there's still a lot of questions up in the air of this trial, but the mystery and the ghost stories remain.
I think that it was either like Jackson or his buddy. Like, let's say one of them was romantically involved with Pearl and was the father of the child. Either they didn't want the kid, whoever was involved with her, and she also didn't want the kid, or maybe they like really didn't want the kid and they like convinced her to be like, hey, we really can't have a kid right now, let's do this abortion, we're like dental students, so it's not going to be a big deal, and like we can definitely perform this
Yeah.
abortion. And so then she goes to have the abortion, they mess it up, and so she like still has the baby. And in
Mm-hmm.
one of their panics to be like, fuck, I really can't have this kid. We've got to get rid of this woman. And so they like basically convince her to cross the
The
border over to Kentucky so that like they're in basically a different state, but all they have to do is cross the border where they like murder her all because like one of them doesn't want a kid.
Yeah, that's kind of where I sit on this, or they could have coerced her to go to Kentucky because like none of them had any connections there. But to be like, okay, the abortion didn't work here, or they were like, let's meet here and then we'll go get an abortion in Kentucky where none of us have any connections and nobody knows us, and if they see us, it's not going to come back to us.
Yeah, because like
Like
you would think though
that's
that Kentucky would have like way stricter laws in terms of that stuff than maybe Ohio would. I'm
yeah,
not 100% sure, but I guarantee you that probably to convince her to go to Kentucky, I'm sure that might have been one of the excuses they used. Like, oh, well, we couldn't perform the abortion for you here, so but I know somebody in Kentucky that can. Let's travel there together. And then they just like attacked and murdered her because they were like, fuck, we got to get rid of this kid and our abortion didn't work.
yeah, because there was I didn't see anything in what I was reading that she had any like physical signs of like trying to have performed an abortion. They did say that she had a lot of cocaine in her system,
Hmm.
which makes me think that because I know stimulants can cause miscarriages, but makes me think that maybe they tried to use cocaine as like a chemical miscarriage agent. I don't know what it's called off the top of my head.
Right. To kind of,
And
like, induce a miscarriage,
yeah,
essentially.
and that might have been why she was a little, like, off and weird.
Right,
Um,
yeah, absolutely.
and then it, like, didn't work, or they didn't know how long it would take or whatever. And also, I couldn't find of anything if, like, I don't know if this is something they can tell, but or if they could tell at the time of, like, this is gonna be gruesome, but if the baby had died before she had, just 'cause the baby is dead doesn't mean it's just gonna fall right out. And that is part of the reason why abortion healthcare is so important, is because somebody can be carrying a, like, deceased fetus and their body is still trying to feed it, but it is not doing anything, so it's just draining the body. So I don't know if these guys, they're dental students, not gynecologists.
Yeah, but in the 1800s, when you're a doctor, you basically do everything. Like, you're a dental student, but,
But
like
dentistry and medicine had split like 50 years ago.
and, like, basically, you just had to take, like, basic medicine courses, and
I
then you
get.
could be any fucking doctor you wanted. Like, you took, like, a couple classes, I think, at that point, and then they were like, "Welcome to being a doctor."
I don't know. I don't know if they, but my point being, I don't know if they knew how long it would take using cocaine as a abortive agent, like, would
No,
take to work or whatever. And if they were like, oh no, it didn't work. I didn't see a baby drop out of her immediately. Let's kill her. Like, I
they're
don't know what their
probably
thought process was.
a
Or if they were just high on cocaine and shit too. They're high on cocaine and morphine and all of the drugs they could get from the medical school.
I
Like,
think they're probably a bunch of fucking idiots that had no idea what they were doing, and, like,
that's for
they
sure.
knew they were way in over their heads and ended up fucking killing this woman because they were like, "Fuck, we don't really know how to do an abortion. We better just kill her."
Super late stage abortion. Killed
Oh
two birds with
no,
one
that's
stone.
so terrible.
I was gonna say, regardless of what happened, like you said, whatever led up to it, I think it was just a bunch of shit hitting the fan, and then being like, "Oh shit! Oh fuck! Oh shit! Oh fuck! How do we deal with this?" And then she ended up dead in a cornfield in Kentucky.
Ah, man, that's really unfortunate. Like, that sucks.
Yeah, but you can see why it's it's an interesting story how they solved some of this and the pieces they put together, and you can see why I was like, I want to talk about this because the ghost story is really cool, and then you look into the story behind it, and you're like, oh, this has a lot of reasons of why women's rights are important, and it's important to not forget where things used to be. And I know that was like over a century ago, but it's still like, yeah, you have to remember that some of this shit is still somewhat applicable nowadays. So you can see why I was
Well,
like, it is also important to remember that rich white men will usually, in this case they did not, but it usually will get off easy for stuff. And I'm not saying he did, but what if in the event, again, since his story didn't change, I don't think this was the case, but what if that other guy, uh William Wood, had done it and they were just like, nah, you're fine. And they just had, the only reason that they convicted these two guys is that they had too much evidence pointing towards them. But it's like a lot of rich white guys will usually get off for shit or get off easier than
yeah, and
other
honestly,
people
if
would.
they are the guys that did it, I'm fucking glad that they got punished for it
Yeah,
because,
me
like,
too.
we don't see that enough in a lot of these cases. But it also does make sense why this turned into a ghost story because honestly, like, a
Hmm.
fucking, like, headless woman found in a field, that is a
Yeah.
fucking wild ride, dude.
And
Like, no wonder it
the
stuck around.
the yeah, and the stories really stuck around because of, like I said, local ghost stories and a lot of murder ballads, bluegrass murder ballads. Like, you can just go on Spotify or YouTube or whatever and just type in like Pearl Bryan murder ballad or Pearl Bryan song, and you'll just get whoop, just like a list of songs, and like most of them are the same, but a lot of them are different, and some of them are like the murder of Pearl Bryan's head, blah 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 blah. It's just like, and that's part of the reason why this has lived on, is because it makes such a good murder ballad, and like you said, it makes such a good ghost story. And if you're like me, you hear the ghost story and you're like, wow, that's really cool. And I had found out like 2 years ago the whole story behind it. And I was like, that's gnarly. And I wanted to, like I said, I wanted to originally do more of the ghost story stuff, but I ended up, there's more meat to the murder aspect of things. But yeah, it
Right.
makes such a good ghost story. But yeah, that's all I have for Pearl Bryan.
Thank you for listening. If you liked it, please rate the podcast and share it with the weird people in your life. Follow us on Instagram at whataboutweird.pod, where we often share pictures related to the episodes. We are also on Blue Sky as What About Weird Pod. If you have any topic suggestions or personal weird stories, please DM us or email us at whataboutweirdpod@gmail.com
And always remember,
to ask about the weird.
bye for now.
now.